Jealous sister stormed my wedding screaming my kids were illegitimate. Then she snapped, caused a scene so insane the cops had to drag her out. So, I'm 24 and just got married about a week ago. But honestly, things didn't go smoothly at all. Actually, they went completely off the rails. Let me take you back to where it all began. I have an older sister. Let's call her Anna. She's 26. And the two of us have had a brutal sibling rivalry for as long as I can remember. I'm not exaggerating when I say we practically hated each other growing up. Every little thing turned into a competition. It wasn't just petty bickering, it was constant one-upmanship. And even as we got older, that bitterness never really faded. We were pros at pretending in front of others, though. To anyone outside the family, it might have seemed like we got along just fine, but underneath it was icy. When we lived under the same roof, we barely spoke. The only time we acted civil was when relatives were around. And even then, it was forced. Our parents. They never made much of an effort to bridge the gap between us. Looking back, I think that passive approach kind of allowed things to spiral later on. But I'll get to that soon. Anna moved out at 18 to go to college. And I remember feeling this huge wave of relief. Finally, I could breathe at home, not having to constantly tiptoe around her moods. She'd only come back for the holidays. And every time she did, she'd go on and on about how amazing her life was. She was attending one of the top business schools in the state, and she loved to rub it in. Sure, I felt a little envious, but my main drive became beating her at her own game. I poured everything into getting into an even better school, and eventually I got accepted into an Ivy League. That moment felt like a major victory. Our parents celebrated my achievement in a way they never had for her, and honestly, it felt good to finally be the one in the spotlight. I thought that maybe, just maybe, this would put an end to our silent war. But nope, a little while later, she casually dropped the bomb that she was starting her own business. And with some help from her dad, she actually pulled it off. I still don't know if it was sheer luck or if she truly worked that hard. But whatever the case, it took off. A couple of years ago, she even moved to Japan to expand into the tech market. Her company blew up, and our parents couldn't have been prouder. Meanwhile, my life had hit a standstill. That was about 2 years ago, and ever since she moved to Japan, her star just kept rising. I, on the other hand, was floundering after graduation. I managed to land a job, but it felt dull and meaningless compared to whatever glamorous life Anna had built. So I quit. That decision, one of the worst I've ever made. I should have stuck it out, tried to grow within the company, but I let my competitive streak get the better of me. I was so wrapped up in trying to outshine Anna that I completely lost focus on what really mattered, my own path. It was a dumb, impulsive move, and I've regretted it ever since. After quitting, I fell into this weird limbo, waiting for some golden opportunity to fall into my lap. Surprise. It didn't. Slowly, depression started creeping in, and Anna's continued success didn't help. Every conversation with my parents turned into them singing her praises. It stung, but I couldn't say anything without sounding like I was wallowing in jealousy, even though, deep down, that's exactly how I felt. So I kept my mouth shut. Every family gathering, I plastered on a fake smile and pretended to be thrilled for her. Anything less would have been seen as petty or bitter. That was around the time I met Tom, my now husband. And honestly, meeting him changed everything. It had been about 6 months since I quit my job. Still no luck with finding anything better, and the frustration was eating me alive. Out of sheer desperation, I downloaded a dating app. I wasn't hoping for romance. I was just looking for a distraction, something casual, something to numb the disappointment I felt every day. I was barely scraping by. Rent was a struggle, and I couldn't even afford basic groceries half the time. My parents were sending me money each month, and I kept promising I'd pay them back once I got on my feet. But every call with them carried that subtle hint of disappointment, and it drove me nuts because I knew I wasn't doing enough. It hurt even more knowing how well Anna was doing while I could barely hold it together. So I kept going on random dates, guys I had zero connection with, just to keep my mind off how badly things were going. Most of them just wanted to hook up, and honestly, I wasn't looking for much more either, at least not back then. Then came Tom. From the moment we started chatting, there was something different about him. He was funny, grounded, and surprisingly easy to talk to. He told me he'd been a straight A student, but had chosen to go to culinary school instead. At the time, he was working a restaurant, and he had this easy confidence that I found incredibly attractive. When he asked me out after about 2 weeks of messaging, I was upfront. I told him I wasn't looking for anything serious. But he surprised me by saying he was looking for something real. He didn't want another casual fling. He was dating with the intention of settling down someday. I respected his honesty, and even though I hadn't expected anything to come of it, I agreed to go out with him just to see how it felt. That first date, it blew me away. It felt like I had known him forever. We clicked instantly. The conversation just flowed, and for once I didn't feel like I had to perform or pretend. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I could just be, and that was a whole new experience for me. Something shifted after that night. I decided to actually give the relationship a shot. We went on more dates, and it just kept getting better. Then, 3 months into dating, I found out I was pregnant. The only thing that really worried me was how Tom would take the news. Everything else, I felt oddly calm about. He already knew so much about me, probably more than anyone else ever had. I told him all about my past, my family, the constant rivalry with Anna, and how it had shaped me. He knew how lost I'd been when we met. And instead of judging me, he encouraged me to change. He was the one who finally shook me out of my slump. Thanks to him, I stopped waiting around for life to magically improve and started actively trying again. With his support, I decided to swallow my pride and return to my old job. That job I went back to, I actually ended up quitting again, and this time, I think it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Things were different now. By the time I found out I was pregnant, I'd already been working again for almost a month, and life with Tom was going really well. Honestly, the only thing that worried me was how he'd react to the news. Most people would probably think 3 months is way too soon for something like this, and just walk away, scared off by the responsibility. But I don't know, I felt calm, like this was the right thing. I can't explain it, but deep down I knew I was ready to become a mother. When I finally told Tom, I braced myself for panic, but to my surprise, he was incredibly supportive. He said it was my body and my decision, and no matter what I chose to do, he'd be by my side. I told him I wanted to keep the baby, and I've never seen someone smile so hard. He admitted that he'd been hoping I'd say that. He said he felt ready too, even though we were both young and hadn't known each other that long. He didn't want to pressure me, which is why he kept quiet, but my choice made him the happiest man alive. We talked it through and decided we didn't have to rush into marriage just because we were having a baby. We wanted to really get to know each other first and take our time with everything else. So we committed to the pregnancy together, and a couple of weeks later, we got hit with another surprise. We were having twins. It was wild, but somehow it just felt right, like we were meant to roll with whatever life was throwing our way. Tom moved in with me not long after we got the news, and he also introduced me to his parents around that time. They were the sweetest people, kind and warm and loving in a way that honestly felt foreign to me. They didn't play favorites. They didn't pit their kids against each other. It was just a normal, supportive household. Watching them made me realize how unhealthy my own upbringing had been, even if I hadn't fully noticed it before. That's probably why I was so hesitant to introduce Tom to my parents. I already knew how they'd react, or at least I thought I did. From their perspective, I was the golden child with the Ivy League education and a bright future. And now here I was living with a man I'd only known a few months and pregnant with twins. I figured they'd lose it. I kept putting off telling them, but once I started a show, there was no hiding it anymore. When I was 4 months along, I finally invited them over to my place. Tom was there too for support. They already knew I was dating him, but they had no idea we were living together or that I was pregnant, let alone pregnant with twins. I expected yelling, disappointment, maybe even threats to cut me off, but that's not what happened at all. To my total shock, they were happy, like genuinely happy. They congratulated me, hugged me, and when I told them I was having twins, my mom practically fainted from excitement. It wasn't the reaction I was expecting, but I was so relieved. After the initial surprise wore off, they even threw me a little party and told everyone they were going to be grandparents soon. I also made it clear that Tom and I weren't planning to get married just because of the babies. We wanted to wait until it felt right. And surprisingly, they were okay with that too. For the first time, they seemed fully supportive. And honestly, it kind of stunned me. I was grateful, really grateful, but also confused. So I asked them why they were being so understanding when I'd expected the opposite. That's when we had a real heart-to-heart. They told me they'd been thinking about our childhood lately. They admitted they hadn't done a great job raising us. Not in terms of love, but in how they handled the dynamic between Anna and me. They thought pushing us to compete would make us stronger, that it would help us aim higher and succeed. But in doing that, they realized they might have actually messed us up in the long run. They said they started to understand how bad it had gotten when they found out I quit my job. They knew why I did it. even though I never told them. They said they could see that I wasn't just trying to find something better. I was trying to beat Anna, and they felt responsible for that mindset. That hit me hard. I'd always thought I was hiding my jealousy pretty well, but apparently they saw right through it. They told me I didn't have to prove anything anymore, that I was worthy of their love no matter what, that they were proud of both of us because we'd always done our best, and that's all that should ever matter. I didn't even realize how much I needed to hear that until they said it. That conversation changed everything. It made the pregnancy feel lighter, like I didn't have to carry the weight of my childhood on top of everything else. After that, I was able to ask for help without guilt. I could lean on them, and they were happy to be there. Apparently, they had tried to have a similar talk with Anna, but it didn't go quite the same. She just laughed it off and told them she didn't need to hear that kind of stuff. She even said she thought I was just having a breakdown because I couldn't handle being the loser for once. And that's why my parents were suddenly trying to cut me some slack by saying they were equally proud of both of us, but I knew the truth. And so did Anna. She just didn't want to accept that maybe our parents were actually trying to be better for once. She didn't believe it. She thought they were only saying those things to keep the peace, and that she was still the one more worthy of their love. Because in her eyes, she was more successful. My parents said they'd talk to her properly when she came home for the holidays because trying to do it over the phone or video call wasn't working, so they promised they'd have the same conversation they had with me. So she'd stop seeing me as her competition, because ever since I announced the pregnancy, she'd been nothing but passive-aggressive, dropping backhanded compliments and weird comments in the family group chat, like she was trying to remind everyone that I had somehow failed I never thought of my pregnancy as something to feel ashamed of, but she clearly did, and to her I'd messed up in the worst way by getting pregnant before marriage and moving in with someone I barely knew. So in her mind, this was her win, and she could say whatever she wanted without consequence. It was wearing me down, and I thought about leaving the group chat so many times, but my parents begged me to stay. They said they were trying to be better, and they didn't want us drifting apart any further. So I stayed for them. They told me they'd talk to her, and if nothing changed, then I'd be free to leave the group, so I agreed. When Christmas came and Anna flew back home, my parents finally had that talk with her, but it was pointless. She wasn't interested in hearing any of it. She'd gone so far off the deep end that humiliating me had become her new favorite hobby. She was unbearable that year. I mean, she'd always been annoying, but ever since her business took off, she'd gotten worse. And that year was the worst because she'd just come back from Japan, and now she had a new reason to act superior. Me being pregnant and still nowhere close to her level of success. She didn't waste a single opportunity to show off or shoot me nasty looks or say things like, "Aren't you happy for me?" with that fake sweetness that made me want to scream. The whole thing was so uncomfortable. I ended up leaving the party early because I was this close to either breaking down or blowing up. Afterward, my parents tried again. They asked her to stop rubbing things in and making everything a competition, but she told them straight up that she'd worked hard to get where she was, and she wasn't about to stop bragging just because I couldn't handle it, and I knew then that I'd had enough. I left the group and finally cut ties with her, and my parents supported that. They agreed it was better this way. I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years, and I had no idea what she was up to until recently when a few of my relatives mentioned that she was back from Japan and had a baby. Apparently, it was a miracle baby, just 2 months old. My parents said they'd been on video calls with her many times and never even noticed she was pregnant, which made no sense. She said it was meant to be a surprise and that she'd gotten married in a private ceremony last year and had just become a mom. She said her husband was still in Japan because of work, but she had flown home with the baby so the family could meet her. I wasn't going to let that get to me. I was getting married myself, and it was supposed to be a happy time. So even though she was back, I continued to avoid her, but it didn't matter because she still found a way to ruin my wedding. She showed up uninvited right after the ceremony, and I'm just grateful that at least she didn't crash it before the vows were done. I saw her among the guests and nearly lost it, but Tom and my parents pulled me aside and calmed me down. They said if I made a scene, I'd just be giving her what she wanted. So as long as she wasn't doing anything outright terrible, we should just ignore her and deal with it later. The wedding was at Tom's aunt's farmhouse and security wasn't tight, which is probably how she got it now. I wish I'd spent more money on it because maybe then we could have avoided a lot of what happened. While she was there, all she talked about was her miracle baby and how lucky she was, and how my kids didn't count because they were born before marriage. She actually said that to people at my wedding, and guests kept coming up to me and telling me what she said. And I had to just smile through it and pretend like it wasn't eating me alive. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I nearly snapped. But before I could say a word, the police showed up. Out of nowhere, they sealed the exits and locked everything down, and in a few seconds they had arrested Anna. There was this woman screaming and crying, holding the baby that was supposed to be Anna's, and she kept saying it was her child. Everything after that was just chaos, cop statements, handcuffs, and nobody really understanding what was going on. Later we found out that the baby wasn't even hers. All the pictures she'd posted online were edited from her friend's social media. She'd photoshopped herself into the photos like some kind of lunatic, and every time she'd shown up with the baby, she'd actually just been babysitting her friend's kid. She'd been staying with that friend ever since coming back from Japan, because she'd ended the lease on her own place and was looking for somewhere new, so in exchange for crashing there she'd been offering to babysit, is why she had never invited our parents or any relatives to visit her, and had only shown up to see them on the day of my wedding, and that too, without her friend's consent. She had apparently taken the baby out while her friend and her husband were asleep, and then refused to take any of their calls afterward, which forced them to get the police involved and have her arrested. Luckily, she had been nonstop talking about my wedding and how she was going to steal my thunder, so her friends figured out exactly where she'd gone and were able to track her down, and that's how the arrest even happened. It sounds insane, and I still can't fully wrap my head around the fact that it really happened, but it did, and it happened to my family, and I've been struggling to process it ever since. I always knew that Anna was obsessed with winning and constantly trying to one-up me, but I never imagined she'd go as far as committing an actual crime just to prove that she was better than me in our parents' eyes. It's disturbing and honestly terrifying now. She's apparently begging her friends not to press charges because she knows she has no real defense and she'll go to jail if it comes to that. But instead of owning up to what she did, she's decided to blame me for it. She says I only got married to spite her and rub my happiness in her face, and that's what pushed her over the edge, which is ridiculous because I hadn't even spoken to her in almost 2 years since our last fight, and had done everything I could to stay away from her. I even let her stay at my wedding when I should have kicked her out, just to keep the peace and not cause a scene. If anything, she's the one who ruined that day for me. So when she reached out yesterday, asking me to convince her friends that I had driven her to this breakdown, I told her that I hoped she did end up in jail or a psych ward, because clearly that's where she belongs. But now my parents are telling me I should help her. They think I need to talk to her friends and explain that Anna was mentally unwell and that I had been tormenting her somehow, just so they won't go through with the charges. They're saying I owe it to her as a sister, and that I should think of the bigger picture. But I don't see why I have to protect someone who spent years tearing me down and then crashed my wedding pretending a stranger's baby was her own, just to outshine me. The whole situation is still in limbo right now, because Anna had been staying with her friend and taking care of the baby regularly. And that complicates things legally. The cops haven't been able to charge her properly because technically she wasn't a stranger. She had been trusted with the baby before, so the line between babysitting and kidnapping is blurry at the moment, and the case can't really move forward unless her friends decide to pursue it. They'd already told the police that they never gave her permission to take the baby like that, but Anna claims otherwise, and now it's all just one big mess, and the truth is nobody knows what to do next. And despite all of this, the one thing my parents are focused on is me stepping in to clean up after her, and I'm just not going to do it. Update 1. So I've finally made my decision, and I've decided to cut ties with my entire family, including my parents. Yes, they were supportive when I got pregnant and after the kids were born, but right now I need peace, and I can't have that if I'm still involved in all their drama. I'm exhausted, and I want to be with my husband and children without feeling like I'm being pulled into chaos every few weeks. I'm grateful for everything my parents did back then, but this is different now, and I don't want to be part of it anymore. And as for Anna, I think it's more than obvious why I won't help her. She created this mess, and she needs to deal with it herself. Tom agrees that this is the right thing to do, and I know he's right. Update 2. I just heard from some relatives that Anna's in real trouble now, because her friends have officially decided to press charges and go through with it. She's still saying she had their consent to take the baby out whenever she wanted, but that's going to be tough to prove, especially since she spent the entire wedding claiming the child was hers. And based on that alone, I don't see any way she can get out of this. It's sad, sure, but it's not surprising, and I haven't spoken to my parents since, and I won't until they admit that what I did was the right thing, and they were wrong to expect me to defend someone who's done nothing but make my life miserable. They need to realize that a lot of what Anna has become is a direct result of the way they treated us growing up, and until they face that I'm not going to have a relationship with them. Update 3, Anna's trial has officially started, and though it's still early, they're saying she could be looking at 5 years in prison if she gets convicted. They're considering her unstable state of mind, so it might be less than that. But either way, it's not my problem. Tom and I are finally going on our honeymoon, and even though I can't ask my parents to babysit because we're still not on speaking terms, we're going to leave the kids with Tom's parents just for 2 weeks. I'm honestly just praying that our honeymoon turns out better than the wedding, and I think it will be, because this time it's just going to be me and Tom.